My name is Juliet Harper, and what I am about to share with you is something I never imagined experiencing. It all began on a quiet Sunday morning while I was meditating in my favorite spot at home. The sun was rising, filling the room with a soft, warm light. I felt a deep peace, as if nothing could disturb that serene moment. However, I had no idea that my life was about to change forever. During the meditation, I felt a sudden pain in my chest, an overwhelming sensation that made me collapse. In a matter of seconds, everything around me went dark. Disoriented and frightened, I realized that something beyond comprehension was happening. My body lay motionless on the floor, but my consciousness seemed to be drifting away, being taken to a place I did not recognize. As I moved away from my body, an indescribable feeling of peace enveloped me. The pain and fear disappeared, replaced by a bright and comforting light. I was in a different realm, a place of radiant light and tranquility. It was as if time had stopped, and I was floating in a space where nothing else mattered. The warmth of the light was welcoming, and I felt incredibly loved and protected. It was then that I noticed a presence approaching. A figure enveloped in light stood out in the middle of the brightness. As it drew closer, I felt a deep connection, as if this figure knew every part of me, every thought, every fear. And suddenly, I understood that I was in the presence of a spiritual being, a guide radiating love and understanding. "Juliet," said the guide, with a voice that was not just heard, but felt in my very essence. Just one word, but it contained more love and grace than I had ever experienced in my entire life. His words resonated within me, dissolving all my insecurities and doubts. I had never felt so known, so understood, and so complete. The guide continued, "You have been brought here for a purpose. There is much for you to learn, and what you discover must be shared." I nodded, unable to speak, completely overwhelmed by the gravity of what was happening. I reached out my hand, and when the figure took it, the light around us seemed to change, and I knew I was about to witness something extraordinary. With a gentle movement, the guide led me to a vast field. "This is the beginning," he said, and as he spoke, scenes began to unfold before me. It was not like watching a movie, but rather living each moment. I was there, experiencing everything, absorbing every detail. Each vision filled me with a deep and urgent understanding of the importance of faith and trust in what was to come. As the scenes unfolded before me, I was struck by the depth of the visions. The spiritual guide beside me explained that I was about to witness future events that would affect all of humanity. I felt like a silent observer, but at the same time, each vision touched my heart in a way I had never experienced before. It was as if I was living those experiences alongside the people I saw. One of the first visions showed a time of great trials. I saw entire cities plunged into chaos, with desperate people seeking answers and comfort. Amidst this confusion, some groups stood out. They were small communities of believers who came together in prayer and mutual support. Even in the face of such adversity, these groups displayed impressive strength and resilience, and it was clear that their faith sustained them. I saw miracles happening among these communities. In one scene, I saw a group of people gathered in a small room, praying fervently for provisions. Outside, the situation was dire, with a shortage of food and water. But to my surprise, I saw the food multiply before their eyes, as if an invisible hand was providing for them. The gratitude and joy on their faces were indescribable. Another vision showed a healing miracle. A woman, who had been gravely ill and bedridden for years, was brought to the center of a prayer circle. The people around her began to pray with unwavering faith, their voices united in one cry. Slowly, I saw the woman gain strength, stand up, and walk for the first time in years. The tears of happiness and relief that streamed down their faces touched me deeply. The spiritual guide explained that these miracles were a response to the unwavering faith of these communities. He said, Those who trust in God and remain steadfast in their faith will find provision and protection, even in the darkest times. I felt an overwhelming sense of hope and encouragement. Despite the challenges that lay ahead, there was a path of light for those who chose to follow it. As these visions continued, I also saw the challenges and deceptions that humanity would face. Charismatic leaders emerged, promising peace and unity, but their intentions were deceitful. Beneath their smooth words was a hidden agenda to lead people away from their faith. I saw many being drawn by these empty promises, while only a few discerned the truth and resisted the temptations. These visions were intense and emotional, and I found myself moved to tears several times. The spiritual guide remained by my side, offering comfort and wisdom. He reminded me of the importance of sharing these experiences with others so they could prepare and strengthen their faith. I knew that this mission would be challenging, but I also knew it was necessary. My heart was filled with determination and love for those I would need to help. As I continued to observe the visions, I was taken to a moment of intense persecution against those who chose to remain steadfast in their faith. I saw scenes of families being separated, friends betraying one another, and individuals being forced to make impossible decisions. Those who refused to follow the imposed system were treated as outcasts, living in hiding or fleeing to save their lives. However, even in the midst of this darkness, there was a bright light of hope. One of the most impactful visions was of a group of believers secretly gathering in a simple house. They huddled together in a small room, their voices low but full of fervor as they sang hymns and prayed together. Their faith created a shield of light around them, protecting them from external forces attempting to destroy them. I could feel the intensity of the love and hope they shared, and it filled me with a deep sense of admiration and respect. The spiritual guide explained that these communities would be essential in the difficult times to come. He said, "They will bear each other's burdens. Where one is weak, another will be strong. Through their mutual love, they will reflect my presence in the darkest moments." The vision of these communities deeply touched me, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination in my heart. As the visions continued, I was taken to witness the challenges these communities would face. I saw how they were hunted and persecuted, seen as threats by the world around them. However, even in the face of danger, their faith never wavered. Their strength came not only from their belief, but from their unity and mutual support. Every prayer, every act of kindness, every word of encouragement strengthened their bond and their resilience. A particularly moving vision showed a small group gathered in a dark room, their hands clasped together as they prayed for protection. Though the environment was grim, a radiant light emanated from them, pushing the darkness away. Their faith was tangible, and their prayers created a shield of light around their community, protecting them from spiritual and physical harm. The scene left me emotional, and I knew that these communities would be beacons of hope in times of despair. However, the guide also showed me the internal challenges these communities would face. Small misunderstandings could be magnified, doubts could be sown in vulnerable hearts, and division could threaten to destroy what they had built. But for those who remained vigilant in prayer and firmly rooted in the scriptures, these attacks would fail. I saw how their faith not only endured but flourished in the face of adversity. The spiritual guide showed me the crucial role of prayer in the survival of these communities. I saw that prayer was not only a form of communication with the divine, but a powerful weapon and shield against the forces of darkness. I saw how fervent prayers created barriers of light around families, communities, and even entire cities. These barriers prevented evil from advancing and offered protection and guidance to the faithful. The vision left me with a clear lesson. Prayer would be the key to survival and victory in the difficult times to come. I was taken to a time of great deception and illusion. I saw charismatic leaders with sweet words and promises of peace, attracting millions. They presented themselves as saviors, bringing solutions to the world's problems. However, behind their attractive facades was a hidden agenda to lead people away from their faith. I was stunned to see how many were deceived by these empty promises. I witnessed entire churches succumbing to this false peace. I saw pastors and religious leaders, some sincere but many deluded, preaching messages that deviated from the truth. Instead of challenging their congregations to remain steadfast, they offered a diluted version of the scriptures, avoiding controversial topics to maintain apparent harmony. It was painful to see the faith of many being eroded by this insidious deception. However, in the midst of this darkness, I also saw those who refused to be deceived. Small groups of believers gathered in secret, praying fervently for discernment and strength. They studied the scriptures with unwavering devotion, seeking guidance and truth. These groups were ridiculed and ostracized, but their faith never wavered. They remained firm, even as the world turned against them. One of the most powerful visions was of a woman standing before a court. She had lost everything, her home, her family, and her possessions, because she refused to accept the mark that determined access to essential resources. Despite her fragile appearance, there was an unbreakable strength in her gaze. She declared firmly, "My hope is not in this world, but in Christ." Her courage and faith inspired many in the court, some of whom decided at that moment to join her in her faith, despite the risks. The spiritual guide explained that this mark was not just a physical symbol, but a spiritual agreement, a definitive choice about a person's allegiance. Those who accepted it sought temporary comfort at the cost of their souls. He showed me how many would be tempted to make this decision out of fear, without understanding the eternal consequences. I saw people struggling with their conscience, some succumbing to the pressure, while others found strength in their faith to resist. I was taken to see the lives of those who refused to accept the mark. They lived in hiding, constantly on the run, but were filled with peace, knowing they had chosen obedience to God over the temporary comforts of this world. I saw how their communities continued to support each other, sharing the little they had and trusting in divine provision. The spiritual guide assured me that their hardships would not be in vain and that they would find eternal life and true peace. I saw that humanity would face unimaginable pressure to abandon its faith. Governments, media, and even family members would become instruments of persecution. However, I also saw an unprecedented spiritual awakening among those who chose to remain steadfast. Amidst this pressure, I saw angels surrounding the faithful, strengthening them and filling them with peace and courage. This vision of resistance and final victory filled my heart with hope and determination. I was taken to a period of tremendous oppression. The pressure to abandon faith was overwhelming, and I saw many struggling to hold on to their beliefs. Governments, media, and even family members became instruments of persecution, manipulating and coercing those who refused to follow the new system. However, I also saw an unprecedented spiritual awakening among the faithful, something that filled my heart with hope. One of the most powerful scenes was of a young couple who had lost everything, their home, their belongings, and even the safety of their loved ones, due to their refusal to accept the mark. They were hiding in a dark basement, trembling with fear but holding firmly to a Bible, the only thing that still gave them comfort. As they prayed, I felt a powerful presence envelop them, a peace that seemed to transcend all fear and suffering. I saw a soft glow on their faces, a light that only true faith could provide. The guide explained to me that this pressure was not only external, but also an internal battle. The enemy whispered lies and doubts into the hearts of the faithful, trying to exploit their weaknesses and fears. In a vision, I saw a woman kneeling, tears streaming down her face as she struggled with her conscience. She was on the verge of giving in to the pressure, but suddenly, she felt a renewed strength in her faith. She stood up, determined not to abandon her beliefs, regardless of the cost. I also witnessed moments when the unwavering faith of the believers inspired those around them. In a courtroom, a man was accused of treason for refusing to accept the mark. With a firm and clear voice, he declared that his hope was in God and not in the empty promises of this world. His words echoed through the courtroom, and I could see the change in the faces of those who heard him. Some, who had been hesitant until then, found the courage to join him, determined to follow the same path of faith. The spiritual guide showed me how, despite the adversities, the faithful would continue to experience divine interventions. I saw a group of people hiding in a forest, without food and water. Desperate, they began to pray together, crying out for help. To my surprise, the ground around them began to sprout with fruits and vegetation, providing sustenance amidst the scarcity. The joy and gratitude on their faces were a testimony of divine provision in times of need. The next scene was even more impactful. I saw believers being brought before a world tribunal, where they were offered one last chance to renounce their faith. Many of them were visibly worn out, but in their eyes, there was an unwavering determination. With courage, they declared their loyalty to God, even knowing the terrible consequences. Their words inspired a wave of faith among the spectators, some of whom decided at that moment to follow the same path, regardless of the cost. The guide showed me the final reward of the faithful. I saw a heavenly scene, full of indescribable light and music. Those who had withstood the trials and kept their faith were welcomed with joy and celebration. Jesus, with open arms, greeted each one of them, saying, "Welcome, good and faithful servant." The vision filled my heart with hope and joy, knowing that despite the difficulties to come, the final destination would be worth every sacrifice. I was taken to witness a scenario of total transformation. The world was changing rapidly, and those who had remained faithful were beginning to see the fruits of their perseverance. I saw entire communities of believers who, despite the persecutions and difficulties, flourished amidst adversity. The faith and unity that sustained them were palpable, and their lives reflected the light and hope they found in their belief. One of the most exciting visions was of a small community that had settled in an isolated rural area. There, the believers had built a life based on faith, mutual trust, and support. I saw children playing, adults working together to cultivate the land, and everyone sharing the blessings they received. It was a vision of simplicity, but also of deep satisfaction and joy. The presence of God was felt in every aspect of their lives, and this strengthened them to face any challenge. The spiritual guide showed me how these communities became beacons of hope for those who were still lost or seeking the truth. I saw people who, tired of the emptiness of worldly promises, found their way to these groups of believers. They were received with love and compassion, and their lives were transformed by the faith and the community that welcomed them. It was inspiring to see how faith not only sustained the original believers, but also attracted and transformed new souls. In one of the most touching scenes, I saw a young mother who had lost everything and was on the brink of despair. She found one of these communities and was welcomed with open arms. Over time, she regained hope and faith, and her life was completely transformed. She went from a position of despair to one of leadership and inspiration within the community, helping others find the path of faith and hope. Her journey of redemption and transformation was deeply moving. As the visions continued, the guide showed me that the spiritual battle was far from over. I saw that even with the strength of the communities of believers, the enemy continued to try to divert and weaken people's faith. However, the difference now was that the believers were prepared. They had their roots firmly planted in faith, and their prayers created a barrier of protection around them. I saw how the collective faith of these communities became an impregnable fortress against the forces of darkness. One of the most powerful scenes was of a group of believers gathered in a small makeshift church. Their voices joined in fervent prayer, and the intensity of their faith was almost tangible. As they prayed, I saw a bright light emanating from the group, spreading and creating a protective shield around the church. The darkness tried to penetrate but was repelled by the strength of faith and prayer. This vision left me with a clear message. Prayer and faith were not only defenses, but also powerful weapons against evil. I saw a renewed world where faith and hope had prevailed. The believers who had resisted and persevered were rewarded with an existence of eternal peace and joy. I saw Jesus, with open arms, welcoming each one of them and saying, "Welcome, good and faithful servant." The sense of fulfillment and happiness was indescribable, and my heart was filled with hope and gratitude. I knew that despite the challenges to come, the final destination would be worth every sacrifice made along the journey. As I continued to absorb the visions and lessons that the spiritual guide shared, I felt a change in the atmosphere around us. The light intensified, and the environment filled with a sense of hope and renewal. I saw a world where the faith and perseverance of the faithful had prevailed. It was no longer a place of darkness and despair, but a realm of peace, joy, and harmony. One of the most moving scenes was of a renewed city where people lived in unity and love. I saw children playing freely in the streets, adults working together on community projects, and everyone living in harmony. The divisions and conflicts of the past seemed to have vanished, replaced by a sense of shared purpose and spiritual connection. It was as if the world had been renewed, and the presence of God was everywhere. I also saw how the faith of the believers had impacted the world around them. The communities that were once small and isolated now flourished and expanded, attracting people from all over. The message of love, compassion, and hope had spread, and many found the peace and redemption they sought. It was a vision of spiritual transformation and renewal that filled my heart with joy and gratitude. The spiritual guide led me to a final vision of a great gathering of believers. I saw thousands of people gathered, their voices united in praise and worship. The energy and joy in the air were palpable, and I felt a deep connection with each person present. At the center of this gathering was Jesus, radiating love and grace. He welcomed each person with a warm embrace, his words of encouragement and love resonating in the hearts of all. Jesus approached me, and I felt a wave of emotion overwhelm me. "Welcome, Juliet," he said, with a smile that reflected pure kindness and compassion. "You have fulfilled your purpose. Now it is time to share what you have seen and heard. Tell them that no matter how difficult the journey may be, the final reward is worth every sacrifice." His words echoed within me, and I knew that my mission was just beginning. As the vision began to fade, I felt a sense of peace and clarity that I had never experienced before. I returned to my body, still lying on the floor of my living room, but now with a new perspective and a deep sense of purpose. I slowly stood up, feeling strengthened and inspired to share my experience with the world. I knew that the journey would be challenging, but I also knew that I was not alone. My story was not just about the visions I had, but about the message of hope, faith, and love that needed to be shared. What I had witnessed was not just for me, but for all those who sought the truth and light in a world of uncertainties. With my heart full of determination, I began to write and speak, sharing my experience with all who would listen. The journey of Juliet Harper was just beginning, and I knew that with faith and perseverance, we could face any challenge together.